This is a how-to guide on setting up a P2P VPS server, and this is going to be a long one. There's going to be 3 essential stages: setting up the back-end server, setting up the front end on the server, which is the part that you interact with in a web browser, and then setting up an SSL certificate for the servers. So this is going to be the first stage, setting up the back end. The first place to go is to the P2P VPS repository on GitHub. And what we're primarily going to be concerned with is this server deployment 2, because that's what we're doing. We're deploying a server. So that's github.com/P2PVPS, and the server deployment 2 should be pinned here at the top. If it's not, you can always scroll down here, and it's going to be down here. And so we're going to follow these instructions. I'm going to go through these instructions step by step, but these will probably change in the future. So if they do change, go with what's written, not with what's in this video. But basically what the server deployment repository is it's a collection of Docker containers and that are all orchestrated with Docker Compose. And so you've got, this is a diagram, you've got your Linux operating system, and on top of it is Docker Compose running all these little Docker containers. And they're all networked together, and these together form the server. And then you have Nginx running on top. It's not inside the Docker container, and it's proxying or routing traffic to the different applications. And you don't really need to know the specifics of that networking in order to successfully set up a server, but just for reference. This is basically a diagram of what's going on. Okay, so the first step is you need a server. You need a web-connected server, and for this demonstration I'm going to use DigitalOcean. You could also use Amazon EC2, Linode, or Amazon's Lightsail. I believe those are all adequate. There's also Vultr. I think any of those systems are adequate and would work. But I have this link, this little affiliate link. If you don't have a DigitalOcean account, you can sign up, and I believe they give you $10 credit, which is enough for 2 months of VPS rentals. So I'm just going to log in, but basically if you don't have an account, create one, and you can see my droplets that I have here, and I'm going to go to create droplet. I'm going to do this right from the beginning, same way anybody else would. Okay, all the directions are based on Ubuntu 16.04, and that's the default. So go ahead and leave that selected. I'm going to go with the cheapest one, which is 1 GB of memory, $5 a month. Like I said, if I'm right about that affiliate link giving you $10, that's 2 months of operational cost right there. I like to put mine in San Francisco because I'm on the West Coast. And you can change the name down here if you want. I'm not going to, because I'm just going to destroy this droplet after I do this demo. So it's creating the droplet, and when it's done, it's going to email me the root password for this new virtual machine it's creating. And the P2P VPS software, this is a good time to note, is based on this model. DigitalOcean, I want to compete with them. I want P2P VPS to compete with them, but not really. I think there's definitely room in the industry for both. I think P2P VPS is a whole niche that hasn't even been explored yet, and I think DigitalOcean does a fantastic job. Okay, so that's ready. They just sent me an email with the root password and the IP address. So I am going to open PuTTY, P-U-T-T-Y. If you don't Google it, and you can download it. I'm going to load one of these, and I'm going to put the IP address in here. This is a Windows machine. If you're on a Mac, you just use the terminal or the console. So I'm going to, port 22 is the default port for SSH. So I'm going to log in as root. I'm going to copy this password here. And if you are using PuTTY, you can right-click your mouse to paste things. And so I'm just creating a new password for the root. And I don't like to do things as a root because it's too much power. I like to create a sudo account that I usually call Trout. User Trout. And then I'm going to add him to add that account to the sudo account, and that way I have sudo privileges, but that's not the default. Then I can just duplicate the session, log in as my new user, and exit from root. Okay, so going back to the repository, so that's this here about the non-root sudo privileges, everything I just did. That's what this link talks about right here. And this is the link for signing up to DigitalOcean. I'm going to skip ahead. Like I said, these are going to change. The order might change. And I'm actually going to create some swap first, because if I do --H to look at the memory, see it says I have no swap and I have 1 gig of memory, which is what I paid for. So I'm going to create 2 gigs of swap space so that I don't run out of memory when I'm building the Docker containers. And so this link right here links to that, and I'm going to go pretty fast because this is a video. You can pause it, and you can also follow these links to read about what I'm doing. But I am going to allocate 2 gigabytes of hard drive space for swap memory. I've done this before, so that's why I'm going so quickly. And there's my new 2 gigs of swap space. And then I'm going to put it in the fstab file so it persists when I reboot. Cool. Okay, so now I have swap space. Okay, so the next step is to install Docker. And here's another link to a tutorial. This is part of what makes DigitalOcean so awesome. They have these tutorials that they invest a lot of money into, and so it makes it real easy to do things like install Docker or create swap space. Kind of like a recipe book. So what I'm doing right now is installing Docker. And again, I've done this before, that's why I'm moving so fast, and I know which commands I'm going for. Feel free to come back here and read these guides. This is excellent knowledge. But basically, I just installed Docker, added myself to the Docker user group, and I know from experience and also from that guide that I have to log out and log back in order for everything to take effect. And now I can issue, so that's looking at all the Docker processes, and there are none, but that also tells me that Docker's running. So that's awesome. Docker's installed. Now I need to install Docker Compose. Follow this other tutorial. And what Docker is, if you're not familiar with it, is it's a virtual machine scripting language. It lets you create virtual machines that run very close to the operating system, so they're very efficient, but they keep applications sandboxed. There's a lot of advantage in that, particularly when it comes to scaling. Okay, so just downloaded Docker Compose, and I'm going to change the permissions, and I'm going to issue a version command to Docker Compose, and it replied back so that I know it's installed. Okay, so that's the hard part in this stage of, is getting Docker Compose and Docker installed. And then the swap's just a recommendation. It's not a must-have. Okay, so I'm going to clone this repository, the server deployment repository, and I am in the home directory, which you can always get back to the home directory by typing cd. And I am going to clone the GitHub repository. Get in there. And now I'm going to initialize by running the init script. And then I'm also going to initialize OpenBazaar by running this second init script. It's downloading the Docker image for OpenBazaar and then just initialize the personalized files, the wallet and the keys and stuff. Let's see. We need the listing manager, which is also a repository under the P2P VPS group. And this one's pretty straightforward. You just follow the directions. And I'm going to go back to my home directory and clone this second repository. And then enter it. And I'm going to run the build script. And that's what these instructions say. Clone it, build it. So the listing manager is a standalone node application that automates the management of the OpenBazaar store. It fulfills orders as they come in, and it removes listings of devices that fall off the network for whatever reason. And so it just keeps things nice and tidy, does things that a human would otherwise have to do. Okay, I skipped ahead there because the build stuff is pretty boring. But I want to point out here that as the Docker script builds the image, it's going to put a number by each line like this, 14, 15, 16, add 20, or out of whatever instructions. If for some reason your Docker image fails to build and you need help, the best thing to do is, so in this case we're in the listing manager, so we want to go to the listing manager repo, which is where we're at, and go to this issues area and click on the new issue, and what you want to put in there is the step where the failure occurred. So this went through, failure should not occur. The advantage of Docker, one of the advantages of Docker is that it's consistent, creates a consistent environment, so if it's running for me, it should run for you. But reality doesn't always work like that. So if you run into trouble, create an issue, and basically just copy and paste everything. And the way you do that in PuTTY is just by highlighting it. Anything I highlight automatically gets copied to the clipboard, and then I can paste it in. So that's basically what you want to do. So back to the directions. Listing manager says go back to server deployment. So that's what we're going to do. Right here, this is where we left off in the server deployment repository. And so now that the listing manager has been built, we're going to go back into the server deployment directory. And this says go into the SSHD container. This will probably be its own repository sometime soon, but for now it still lives in the server deployment repository. But this is building the container that handles the SSH. So if we go back to this diagram, we built the listing manager. Now we're building the SSH server. The OpenBazaar one is done by OpenBazaar. We just download that. And then this Koa API, that's the actual P2P VPS Server repository. Okay, so the SSH container is built. And we're going to go into the root directory of the server deployment, and there's this Docker Compose YAML file. We're going to build that by going Docker Compose build. And this is going to build the Docker image that contains the P2P VPS server code. Okay, so that's built. And we didn't get this error, but sometimes if you do that, like if I was to do it again, issue that same command, I'd get this error, and it's confusing because what it's causing it is this. It's not there yet. It'll be there after I build the thing for the first time. Anyways, we're going to skip that. I'll come back to that. We're going to run everything, Docker compose up, and it's probably going to need to download some images, but it's pretty fast. Okay, so it downloaded Mongo. I think it already had OpenBazaar and whatever it needed. And you can see the output here. OpenBazaar started fine. We're running the latest server, which is 12.0. And the API, this is a message from the P2P VPS server. You can see the different containers are listed here on the left and in different colors. So I'm going to hit Control C, and that's going to shut everything back down. And then I'm going to clean it up with Docker compose down. That's the proper way to close everything down. And you can verify everything's down by going Docker ps-a for all. So if there was any process, even if it was stopped, it would show up, but nothing's listed, so everything's shut down properly. You want to check that because when you stop Docker containers, they don't necessarily exit memory; they still take up resources. Let's see. So I can show you now this data folder. So if I was to run the build command again, it would give me an error right here, and it's because of this data file. So the solution is to go sudo rmrf data, so that says delete the data directory and force it, that's the F, and don't bother me with questions, just do it. And the sudo gives you root privileges, which is what you need in order to delete that directory. And then you can rebuild it if you need to rebuild it. Let's see. So we brought them down, and okay, this is the time when you would configure your OpenBazaar, but this is the alpha. I expect a lot of people just to be developers, and that's why you would be following these directions. So by default, it's configured for Bitcoin Cash. The login name is your username. The password is your password. So you can log in. Where is the? If you open your OpenBazaar application and go to your servers, and let's say you're going to add a new server, standalone, and that's this information. Your server IP is going to be the IP address or the name or whatever. The username is going to be your username. Password is going to be your password. You're going to go SSL off, and it's going to not like that, but you're going to say do it anyways. And that's how you'll be able to connect to the store. And that's all by default. And if you want to change the default, then you should edit the config file, which is located in your home directory, .p2p VPS OpenBazaar, and it's right here, this config file. So you can edit that with nano. And I think you have to have sudo privileges in order to do that. Yeah. So anyways, that's how you do that. But you don't have to do that. You can just leave the defaults. So everything came up and everything's running good. So we can run it, daemonize it by going docker compose up and then -d. And that's going to send it to the background. And everything's up and running. But then once everything's running, it'll give us back the command line. And everything will be running in the background. And you can check, you can see what's running with this docker ps command, processes. And you can see the output of the individual containers by doing docker logs, and then for instance the listing manager. Copy that and paste that, and there's not a whole lot of info because it's booting up and there were no issues. But let's see, if we do the OpenBazaar container right here, yeah, there's the output. And so that's a good way to check your logs. So the server's up and running, and but there's no front end. It's just the back end. It's just an API basically, and an open bazaar store, and a database, and all the support stuff. So that concludes stage 1. Stage 1 is complete. So stage 2 will show you how to set up the front end, and that is the dashboard that runs in the browser and then interacts with the back end that we just set up. So let's dive into that and see how to do that. So you're going to go back to P2P VPS group repository, and you want this dashboard repository. So back here in the server, go back to your home directory. There's our server deployment and our listing manager that we did from stage 1. And we're going to clone the dashboard. And go in there and follow these sort of rough. So Node, let's see, is Node installed? Node is not installed. So we're going to install Node, and the best way to do that is to go to nodejs.org and follow these directions for Debian and Ubuntu-based Linux distributions. We're going to copy this. I think that's all we need. And it's important to point out we're installing Node 8. You can probably install 10 if you want, but 8 is the official version, and it definitely will not work with 6, which is the next version down. Okay, so now Node and npm are both installed, and that's what we needed. And we need to install the dependencies. Okay, those dependencies are installed. That'll take a minute. And now, for now, we'll just do the npm run. Oh, actually, first before you do that, do ifconfig and get the IP address. And let's see. Here's the IP address right here of our droplet. That was also in the email. And we can go npm run serve. And this is going to run a sort of interactive view instance that is capable of being debugged with Chrome DevTools. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. And it's going to come up on port 8080. So if we paste in the IP address and go :8080, that should bring up the dashboard. Okay. And if you want to, if you're a front-end developer and you get to this point, you can go to, and you're in Chrome. I believe Firefox has DevTools as well, but I like to use Chrome. I got more tools, developer tools, and I have installed this View DevTools plugin for Chrome, and so that gives me this here, and I can dive into the different components here in the so all these various things. Because this is the first time it's come up, there's no user accounts. This thing's intentionally easy to create accounts. So I just did test and click create account. Log in. And you can see, like, I've got because I have this open, it paused, and I can debug and step through the code. It logged me in as user test. This is a new installation, so there's no marketplace here. There's no devices subscribed. So I can go here and I can add a new device, and everything's running. The only problem is that this is pretty ugly link to share, and it's not secure. It's a regular HTTP. It's not HTTPS. And the way Chrome works now, if we assigned this to a URL, Chrome would default to HTTPS, and it wouldn't let us look at just a regular HTTP. And so that brings us to stage 3. We need to get an SSL certificate and assign this server to a domain name, and that will let normal people use it and feel secure using this new server. So that's coming up next. So before you can install an SSL certificate, you need a domain name. That's the first step. So I'm going to assume you have one, and for this example, I'm going to use a domain name that I'm probably going to get rid of. Is this purelink.biz? I registered that, and I'm just going to let it expire. So that's what I'm going to use for this domain. So I use Namecheap. There's a lot of other registrars out there like GoDaddy and Network Solutions, but they all have some area that you can get into and change the name server. But it's going to be set to whatever, this was Namecheap, set to Namecheap. If it's GoDaddy, it's going to be set to GoDaddy. And then you need to edit that and point your own name server. And if you're using DigitalOcean, it's going to be ns1.digitalocean.com and ns2.digitalocean.com. I think there's an ns3 and an ns4, but I usually stop at 2. And then in DigitalOcean, you're going to go to the networking link here in the menu, and you can see all the domains I have here. And you'll go to add domain. Type your domain in there, add it in. I've already done that, and that's going to take a while. Usually about 20, sometimes 20 up to 24 hours, sometimes up to 48 hours, but usually in a couple hours things will change, and you'll go to this will automatically be populated, the name servers, and you'll create an A list name. You put in your host name, or you put in @ here to handle everything, and then you select one of your droplets, like this droplet here. But I've already made that entry, so you'll hit create record, and it'll create this line here. But for your domain, and so that's how you create an A record, and that's what you need to do. After you do those two things, edit your name server and your registrar, and create an A record for create a new domain entry in the networking section of DigitalOcean. Then you just need to wait, and that can take some, like I said, that can take some time. If you wait an hour and it still hasn't resolved, then you might try flushing the cache in your browser. But I'm going to assume that from here that everything's working for you. I did this a while ago. So I've waited. I actually just confirmed that it's resolving on my computer. If I ping the URL, it comes back with the same IP address that was in that email, or if I did the ifconfig. So I know that it's resolving on this computer. So I'm ready to go. I'm all set. And okay, so that's that first step. The next step is to go back to the server deployment repository, and there is this Nginx directory, and this has step-by-step instructions that I'm going to walk through here for installing Nginx. Ignore the references to Connect CMS. This was a software we used for an earlier version, and we don't use it anymore. But everything in this with regard to Nginx still applies. So I'm back in my DigitalOcean droplet. And I'm going to follow these directions. In fact, I already did that, so I'm going to skip that step. And Nginx. Okay, so then we can go into the sites available directory, and we want to back up this default script. Because it's always good to get back to that default script. So what we want to do is copy this script and replace that default script with it. But before we do that, we want to go back to our home directory, go back to the dashboard, and build the dashboard. So what this does is it compiles everything, minimizes it, makes it much more efficient. And it's the same thing that we were viewing earlier, the dashboard, but it's delivered much more efficiently. And it compiles it into a dist directory. And PWD stands for print working directory. This is the directory we're going to want to serve with Nginx. So I'm copying that. So now we can go back to the Nginx sites available directory. And I meant to actually remove the default because I want a blank one. Sudo nano default. Cool. Now we can copy and paste this example script in here. Go up to the top and replace the P2P VPS.net references with the domain we're using, in this case purelink.biz. We also want to do the www version. And actually we're not ready for the SSL stuff, so I'm going to do #, which comments those two lines out. And then here is the directory that we want to serve from. Oh, didn't mean to do that. Try that again. I'm going to save that, go back to the dashboard and this directory, copy that. There we go. Sites available. Let me edit that. Okay, so here we go. Here we want to replace the directory reference, and again replace this purelink.biz. And comment out these two SSL ones, and then there's one more down here, right there. So basically what this says, and I'll show you in the browser. So hit Control X to exit, and then Y to save, or N to not save. But this first one here says anything with a /API send to the API handler, which is on port 3001, and anything else send to this directory, which is the dashboard, like normal HTTP or HTTPS. Okay, so let's make sure that we have no syntax errors, and we don't. Syntax is okay. And we can do sudo system control restart Nginx, reboot Nginx, and let's see what happens. Okay, so if we go to purelink.biz, this is coming up. Luckily, it's loading the HTTP version. Sometimes Chrome gets cranky and it doesn't want to do that. It'll only load the HTTPS version. But you can see it says not secure. That's going to freak a lot of people out. So let's just get that SSL certificate in place. and this is how we do it. I'm going to go back to my home directory because I think I might need to download something. I'm going to install the certbot stuff. So that was already installed. I'm going to add the certbot repository. Update. Bring all that in. And then install the Let's Encrypt certbot. So we need to type out this command, but we don't want to do it verbatim. We want to replace the example.com with the domain that you're using. In my case here, I'm going to use the purelink.biz and replace that. Okay, so sudo certbot cert only web root w. Okay, so the web root is going to be home directory dashboard dist. Same one we put in the Nginx container. And we're doing purelink.biz and www.purelink.biz, which as far as SSL certificates are concerned is a different domain. Okay. And then I'm going to enter my email address, and I'm going to agree to the terms of service and say no, don't send me anything, because they already are. Ooh, failed. Oh, it failed because I don't have the www. What I need to do is create a CNAME record. So going back to DigitalOcean and the networking menu thing, I think I want that is an alias of the host name. I think that's what I want. Create a CNAME record. Let's check that out. Well, let's just do specifically www. I think the star should have worked, but we can also just specifically do that, and then let's see. Yeah, it might just be taking a minute. I'm going to go ahead and rerun that certbot, and we'll see what happens. Yay, okay, that worked. And this is an important link right here. That's the full chain and the private key. That's where they're located at. So let's continue on with the tutorial here. Take note of the directory path. So whereas this one is example.com full chain, this is purelink.biz full chain. Okay, so next we need to create a DH group, and I forget what that acronym stands for, but it basically lets the computer do a whole bunch of encryption. And sometimes it takes a few minutes, sometimes it only takes a few seconds. Part of the beautiful randomness of encryption. Okay, so private key was generated, and next going to go back into this Nginx folder, but the snippets subdirectory, and sudo nano SSL purelink.biz.conf. We want to copy and paste these two lines in there and then edit these lines. This is going to be purelink.biz. This is the path that we were supposed to take note of earlier. Both of these. Okay, so that should be the situation there. And next we want to create this SSL params.conf and then copy and paste all this, and there's nothing that needs to be edited. It's just a copy and paste kind of situation. Okay, and we've already backed up the Nginx file. That's going to get removed. So first of all, let's check and make sure that we still have, okay, syntax is still good. We're going to go back into the sites available for the default script and uncomment these two lines. So now those should be in place and our SSL should work. Oops. Doesn't like that. Okay, so this is odd. There's some sort of typo in here, but I'm not detecting it. So what I did is I copied this and then tried to cat it, which is basically printed to the screen, and it said it's not there. But I know that I can do sudo ls this directory. There we go. Oh, I was missing the L. That was the problem. Okay. So let's fix that. I had it there. It's in the comp file. So I need to go back to my snippets. What does it say? Nginx.conf failed. I think there we go. Pure link. Okay. Yeah, these these scripts are very particular. All right. Yay. Okay. So syntax is okay. System control restart Nginx. Okay. So reboot. Still in HTTP. Now let's try HTTPS. Purelink.biz. Yay! Okay, now we're secure. Now we can log in. Oh, that's weird. There we go. There we go. Yeah, okay, so everything's running. So the SSL certificate is off and running. We've got Nginx proxying. It looks like, based on the fact that I was able to log in, that the API is working correctly. In fact, let's just check the console and see. Yeah, everything's running. There's no errors. And you can always, you can still go back to the, if you want to help with the code in the front end, you can still go back to the dashboard, go npm run serve, and that, again, that'll bring up the development server, which, to see how there's no view menu here, because this is the compiled version. But now this can come up and I can go to :8080, and maybe that's not supported with HTTPS. Oh, okay. Well, I can still go to the IP address, which was this right here. And that's fine to use the IP address 192.241.237.217. It's okay to go to the IP address for the developer stuff, because this isn't supposed to be public facing. It's supposed to be just for developing code and working on the front end. And let's see what happened. So it's running. Okay. Super weird. I don't know what's going on here. There we go. I don't think it liked the liked it being open. I think the errors I was seeing was because I had this open. It wanted it closed. Load the page, then open the developer tools, and then you can access the view stuff. And yeah, I really like it because you can drill down into specific components, and it makes it real easy for working with Vue.js. Okay, so SSL's installed, developer website's installed on our domain name. So I think that pretty much wraps up this video. So if you've gotten this far and you have your own server up, this is great. Hopefully you've said hello in the Slack channel. And I've got two servers set up. I've got the P2P VPS net, which is slowly becoming a production server. And I created a second server called this test.p2pvps.net. So if you edit some code on your own development server and submit a pull request, this will probably where it'll get loaded as a sandbox to try out before pushing to the main server. So I welcome your pull requests and hope that you submit some. Enjoy.